we get into our discussion for this morning. And joining me, no stranger to, these to the table, we have back with us Camille. Good morning, Camille.
Hi, good morning.
Right, and joining us is the very talented, very beautiful, very lovely Natalia Dopwell. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, how are you all doing this morning?
I'm good.
Okay, lovely. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the singer's journey, right? And what that sort of entails, and as well as the sort of expectations. So we have a very young up-and-coming singer, very young up-and-coming performer, as well as a very seasoned professional who's been doing these things for a while, all right? And is really, really good at it, if I do say so myself. So before I get to Natalia, Camille, I have a quick question for you.
Okay.
So you're a singer, you're a dancer as well. Maybe acting and theater might be in your future, who knows? But what is the general trajectory of where you want your career to be in the performing arts?
Well, you are right. I do love musical theater. So really the goal is Broadway or West End. I just know I love singing, I love dancing, and I love acting. So musical theater, you know, it encompasses all three. So that's what I want to do.
Okay. All right. So Broadway and West End and all of those things met? Yes? All right. Nice. So, Natalia, we just heard that. In comparison, at Camille's age, what was your mindset and how can you compare that? How can you sort of describe that journey from then to now for you?
I think, well, when I was Camille's age, to be honest, I didn't envision music as a career that was possible. When you look back, and I don't want to say how long, we had very little locally to support music as a career. So there was no university, no tertiary education. In fact, we didn't even have music at secondary level as a subject that you could get a CXC or CSEC certificate in. So although I was training and performing a lot, I was traveling to perform, I was competing in music festival, none of this was reflected on my school transcript whatsoever. Right? It was just thanks participation trophy. You're really good at your extracurricular activity, and you make the school look very good. That was literally the sum total. And as for my school transcript, it kind of wasn't terribly impressive because I was never terribly engaged in the academic environment in primary school or secondary school. So I would never have continued on to tertiary education were it not for singing. So at 16, my plans were to, have a nice weekend, have enough money from my job to, because of course you had a job that had nothing to do with the arts in that day. So I had several jobs along the way. I was a receptionist at Crown Plaza at one point. I worked in the engineering department at CCN. I worked in a baby store. I worked at Guardian Life.
Oh, wow.
Right. Yeah. So I had, for like 5 years after graduating A-levels, I had a varied work because you always thought of music as this thing you just did for fun. So I was on the outside, yes, I was touring, right? So I got to go to, I was with Love Movement for a while, so I went to Canada and New York with them. I was participating in the music festival, winning trophies. I was singing at weddings, these kind of things. And that was the sum total. I moved on to Marionette's Chorale at one point, went to Costa Rica with them. Okay. This was the sum total of what I thought I was going to do singing. Okay. I would, sing at weddings and funerals, and that would be it, right? And every once in a while, sing at somebody's recital. And it was actually Enrique Ali's, at one point he suggested, Natalia, you really should go abroad and do a master session, a master class. So I gave a recital and made some money to go to France. I come from a large family, so the idea of mommy and daddy just whipping out the credit card and putting me on a plane to France. It was not going to happen. So we raised money, and I went to France, and I got a taste in a 2-week workshop in Nice of this whole other world
Right.
that I was weirdly prepared for, because I'd been training since I was about 14 in operatic vocal technique. And but at this stage, I'd only actually seen one opera live, and I was singing in it. So weird disconnect between what I had been training for and what I had been exposed to. And so the teachers there were like, yeah, you really should get into university. And I'm like, oh, great. Yeah, I'll just ask mommy and daddy to swipe the credit card. Right? Because, of course, the typical person who gets exposed to classical music and gets trained in classical music at a young age typically has the financial background to accompany that, right? Because let's be honest, I mean, the kind of people that I would meet, like when I finally did get to university level, the kind of people I was meeting, you know, some of them, like one of them was living in an apartment on Central Park West. Another one, her family had a chateau in France.
Oh my word.
Right? A lot of them had trust. A lot of them had trust funds, and so you just realize that. I mean, it wasn't everybody. There were certainly a lot of people that came from more normal, to my mind, modest backgrounds. But you got this sensation, a distinct sensation. It was not a level playing field at all, right? So the things that I would have to, well, annually I would come back. When I got into Manhattan School of Music, I would come back once a year to give a recital so that people would not forget who I was,
Right, yeah.
and apply to the Prime Minister's Sport and Culture Fund for a scholarship for the next year, because they only give annually, okay. Right? And then once I had secured that funding, go back to the US Embassy and get my visa for the next year.
Right.
Okay, so they got to see me a lot.
Made some friends in the US Embassy.
Right.
A little bit.
Yeah. What? So it really was. I think, looking back on it, I don't think that when I started, I understood just how steep the climb was going to be. But, you know, when you love doing something, you keep doing it. And I did realize as I continued in the journey, and I can't speak to what motivates other people, but I realized the things that motivate me. And I realized I did not care which stage I was on, but what was more important to me was who was in the audience. And I started to realize that I was singing for all these audiences. I was singing at Carnegie Hall. I was singing, you know, I did a wonderful summer program with Martina Arroyo, her Prelude to Performance. I did, you know, I got to perform for Deborah Voigt one time. I got to, you know, sing, you know, lots of roles and everything. And I was doing really well. But I didn't have anybody in the audience that I even really cared about. And so there's this, you know, there's this preparation that takes months and months and months and months and months and months. You get on the stage, you do this wonderful job. It's like this huge explosion of endorphins, and you're like super excited. And then you come off the stage, you get lots of congratulations, you get some flowers, and then you go home by yourself. And I realized, I was like, I don't think I want this life. Okay. It's not that I don't want to perform, but I don't want that lifestyle, right? And so my career trajectory looks very different to what I think a lot of people envisioned for me.
Right. And yeah, and you mentioned doing it for the love of it. And I think when I first enrolled into UE to do my certificate, and then I did my bachelor's, I thought we were all here for the same reasons. I thought we all did it for the love and the passion of it. Yes, there was varying degrees from person to person, but I remember maybe our first, second class of the semester, our lecturer asked us, you know, why you're here. And a lot of people, some people said, I love it, this is what I want to do, I see myself doing this, you know, the generic, whatever. And then a couple people kind of shocked me and said, well, this is the only subject that I sort of barely enjoyed. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then someone said, nothing else to do except this, and it's the only thing that I'm good at. I hate everything else. So I'm like, and then, but the irony though, because people who don't consider themselves musically talented or artistically talented, they're like envious of what we can do, of these skills and stuff like that. So my expectations kind of just got shattered in that very first week of school. So I'm wondering, like, what are some of the expectations, and you teach as well, so what are some of the expectations that maybe your students have probably expressed, and as they've gone on, as they've developed throughout their careers, then they realize, oh, water more than flour.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you've seen?
Well, I mean, I don't really like to speak to other people's motivations.
Right.
Because yes, they vary quite intensely. Because you have some people that, that love singing but actually don't love singing in front of an audience. You have some people that love engaging with social media, and some people that absolutely hate it. Some people are movers, they love to move on stage, and some people don't love to move. Some people engage well with an instrument while they're performing, and some people absolutely can't focus on anything else once they're performing. You have some singers that are able to engage with technology, which I think is an exciting, new development. You've got, all of this sort of like new electronic vocal experience that singers can get into, and genuinely have wonderful careers. And others well, for me, I hate technology. If I could sing unamplified, I would be happy.
Right.
As soon as you put a microphone in front of me, I'm like, oh gosh, here we go again. And I now have this, it feels like an interference between my vocals and my audience.
Okay.
Right? Some people love to connect viscerally their true personality with their audience, and other people prefer a character. They prefer to have that sort of like character to exploit, and they leave sort of who they are off the stage, and it's like this relief. They get to like play a character, and other people are deeply uncomfortable with connecting with their true self on the stage. Some people are more into the performance aspect of it, and some people want like a really genuine like one-on-one, or just you and a pianist and the audience. And so I think there's really so many different ways that we can connect with an audience. We can find a love of what we do. Some people are just absolutely intuitive teachers, and they're able to share their knowledge without in a very genuine way. And some people come to teaching with a lot of regret and feeling like they have failed somehow, because they're not making every single dollar they earn coming from performance. So some people feel like they need to hide what their job is because their career goals aren't reflected in their job, right? And of course, there's also the typical student expectation of very, very fast progress and an overwhelming success that happens overnight, because that is the story we get told by every reality show out there.
By every person that's actually not in the industry, and we take the advice from the wrong person.
Exactly. Well, this is the thing too, is like we have a lot of competing voices in our heads. People who are not performers typically will understand the pressure from their parents and maybe their family members, aunties, that kind of thing. But once you begin performing, every single person you've ever met at church becomes invested in your progress.
Yes.
Every single person that ever comes to a show wants to know, what are you doing?
And they ask you week after week after week.
Right, and they come back, I saw you perform when you were 13 years old, and I'm so proud of you, and what are you doing next? And it can be very, very, it can really, it can overwhelm you, because you start to, because your own inner voice that's telling you the things that you actually enjoy start to get get overwhelmed by all these competing voices. And that kind of public ownership of your progress can be something that we don't even realize is a bad thing. Right? That whole idea of you have a talent, so you must use it for the benefit of the community and the country and the this and the that. And this can cause a lot of issues when we need to take a break. Or we
you feel guilty for resting, for
yes,
taking a break.
or the finances just aren't measuring up,
Yeah.
right? And the lifestyle that you want to lead is not measuring up with the checks and balances, the credits and the debits are not lining up, right? But we were speaking before about financial dysmorphia, right?
Our new favorite too. Our new favorite too.
Right? Because of course, once we go in on stage or we're going out to network, we have to make sure that we appear successful. And then, you know, I mean, one of the things that really struck home to me was during the COVID pandemic, when you realized how many performers who seemed to be very, very successful were struggling just to pay the bills and keep a roof over their head with a loss of income for 3 months.
Right.
And so it means that, that we have to be aware that what we see of these very successful performers is the tip of the iceberg. It's maybe, you know, 10% of their week, you know, they spent on stage.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time, they are there themselves. They have bills to pay like everybody else. We don't get visas just because, you know, we have so many followers on Instagram, right? So if you need to travel, you've got to pay those bills just like everybody else. If you, you know, to eat, to pay rent, to have a car, all of these expensive, and if you have a family as well, right? So, so the idea that just because someone appears successful on stage, that their life is complete. And wonderful, and everything, all the checks and balances make sense because they give this impression that they're successful, is something that I think a lot of artists struggle with because they tend to look at each other's social media and see the things that each others are doing. Again, it's the tip of the iceberg, right? And everybody's putting that tip of the iceberg on social media.
Yeah, people, listen, social media is literally just the highlight reel of some people's lives. You don't know as soon as you finish, post something, you don't know if what they're like with the bills on the table, and they're like, how am I going to, like, we post the good times, yes, and it's really good to sort of celebrate it, but you're not getting the full picture on that point. But so I want to bring in Camille just a little bit for this, because you mentioned that some singers feel bad that the performance does not cover everything. It does not, you know. We have Camille here, who's a singer. She also plays piano really well, and she's also a dancer. So she's sort of, and I've seen the journey, she's sort of multifaceted, and if you don't see her in the choir, you're seeing her in the dance. If you're not seeing, she's by the piano. So she's a multi-skilled singer. How important, because I remember thinking about this, I'm like, if you're only a singer, you must have a really, really hard time sort of surviving in the industry, because all you lean on is performance, all you lean on is your voice. You know, you're not someone like me who sings solo chorally, as well as conducts, as well as plays the piano, as well as teaches, right? How do you think it's important for the singer to be as multi-skilled as possible to survive in this industry?
I think what we, as performers, need to start to recognize is that we are all diverse artists in some way or another. So we will all have strengths and weaknesses. And I like to think of it as any small business, as any entrepreneurial effort, except that you're selling a skill, and sometimes we let one skill define us. But as with any entrepreneur would know, the more skills you have, the better equipped you are to survive lean times in one than the other, right? So, but I don't like to just reduce it to what we do on stage. There's a lot of skills that accompany the performing arts that are a natural fit for performers. So things like photography, makeup, right? Things like the arts administration, which frankly should be being executed by people who actually understand the arts.
Yes,
right? you know, just backstage lighting, all of these things, you know, sound engineering. Wouldn't it be nice?
Wouldn't it be
if the
lovely?
sound engineers, you know,
Knew how to mic a choir properly.
you know, and valued their hearing.
Yeah.
Whew, right? And so it's not just the skills that we can use on the stage that are important, but also the other skills that accompany that. So for instance, I consider maybe being a vocalist to be my career and being a teacher to be my job.
Okay.
Right? So the job is very different to the career in my mind. Because, for instance, there are some things that I will do for my career that may not pay me as well, but it is important. So for instance, if I am appearing on a fundraiser as a performer, typically, especially if there's no payment involved these days, what I will do is I'll be like, okay, well, I'll be performing this. And I will not basically give them the freedom to choose what I'm going to perform. Okay. I will perform something that I want a recording of.
Yeah.
Right? And so I find a way to make it work for me. Yeah. With my job, typically I am a little bit less flexible. I'm more like, okay, so this is what we're doing in this time, and we will have, I have this hour allotted to you, and this is what we're going to do in this hour. And I will invest in my job as well as invest in my career. So I will continue doing workshops and masterclasses to become a better teacher, just like I do in my career. But if I, you know, in terms of like, you know, photo shoots and that sort of thing, I'm going to more likely pay for a photo shoot where I'm a performer as opposed to pay for a photo shoot where I'm a teacher. Okay. Because one of these aspects requires photo shoots and the other one does not, right? So there's different, you know, and of course every performer has different resumes. So, you know, so you've got your performer resume, you've got your teacher resume, if you're a dancer, you would have your dancer resume. If you're an actor, you would have your actor resume. And, you know, lots and lots of different opportunities would require different kinds of interviews or auditions and all of these things. And so what I will say is that for me, for instance, I'm not interested in, say, doing makeup into a side job, but I know how to do my makeup so that I don't have to pay someone to do it, right?
Sorry to all the makeup artists out there.
No, they understand. And there's a lot of singers who are makeup artists and they will understand, you know? So and the same thing goes for having a website. I'm not a website, you know, graphic artist, but I certainly know how to modify my own website. And if you get to a certain point where you want to pay someone to do that, that's great. It doesn't mean that I'm trying to take a web artist's job. Right. It means that my checks and balances right now, it does not make sense paying someone to do something that I can do for myself, right? Because again, it's that financial dysmorphia thing. If I'm being paid $3,000 for a gig and I spent $1,500 on a new dress for that gig, and then I go out and spend $300 on my hair, buy some new shoes to go with it, and then get someone to do my makeup. At the end of the day, it's a graduation expense. It's not, you know, it's just, you know, you've just checks and balances. You've not made any money.
All to sing one song.
Well, this is the thing, right? So we
all
have
for 5 minutes on stage.
We have to just be aware that, you know, if we are thinking professionally, which, let's be honest, not everybody wants to engage with music as a professional. And that is good too, that is okay, right? Because it is also a complete misconception that that there's anything wrong with remaining an amateur intentionally. Right. Because this is wonderful stress relief, right? Singing in a choir is extremely good for your endorphin levels and your serotonin. Everything is, you know, it's wonderful to gather as a community and sing, right? But if we are intentionally engaging with music as a career or as a job, then we need to start looking at, okay, I'm paying this money for this opportunity because it's training, right? So that makes sense because that's going to further my career, right? I have a job, I'm being paid X, Y, Z. Therefore, it does not make sense for me to spend X and Y and to only take home Z.
Okay.
Right? We have to make sure that we think like a business,
Yes.
because businesses don't typically walk around and spend more than they earn in order to look successful.
Because in a sense, as an artist, you're basically a sole trader.
You are.
You are the business.
Yeah.
So you sort of have to treat yourself in that way. So I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to put the spotlight on Camille, just for a teeny tiny bit, right? But it kind of ties in. Have you ever experienced in your life stage fright?
No, never.
Really?
Yes, I'm one of those rare souls. I never had stage fright. I think it's because I've been performing on a stage since I was like, let's say 6 years old. I joined my school choir when I was 6. And yeah, we did lots of plays and stuff. So I never really had stage fright. I was always up in the front row. So, and I think because it's interesting to reference what you were saying before about how some people think of when they perform on stage, they think of it more as a character. And I think that's why I never really had stage fright. I always thought that I wasn't really myself on stage. I was more putting on a performance. And yes, I do like to put some of myself in my characters when I'm on stage, just so it feels more genuine. And I do really love performing, so I'm gonna have parts of myself there.
Right.
But I've always thought of it more as a character that I was portraying on stage, so I never really was afraid to look people in the eye and as I'm performing, because yeah, it's a character that I'm presenting. So I never really had stage fright at all.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, in the age of, now obviously you would have peers who are in the same things as you and would also like to pursue the performing arts in the future. In the age of, I'm not just gonna say social media but in the age of like social overload and information overload, and it's just this overload of everything that's happening, it can sort of affect the singer's mental health a little bit, all right? And I'm curious, as a young person, like, what are some of the things that you see your peers going through that maybe you experience for yourself, and how does that translate to your singing? Like, how does, well, first of all, does mental any sort of challenges arise, and does it affect your singing or your performing? And how do you and your peers sort of deal and cope with it a little bit?
Well, I would say, well, I'm 16.
Right.
I just wrote CSEC. I'm applying to UE.
Talk about stress.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes up a lot is talking about our futures and planning for our future. And well, for me and my friends who want to do music as a career, you know, it's not the most stable job.
Right.
The checks don't exactly come in monthly.
Right.
So
For sure.
it's definitely daunting. I'm very lucky to have a family and a community that's very invested in what I love. So I'm like, I want to do music as a career. I want to know how to dance. I want to do acting lessons. And I'm very grateful that they support me. So definitely the stress comes from the not really sustainable job that we want to have, but we are still pursuing.
Right.
And how we cope, I think just knowing that people are out there going through what we are going through, it's nice to know that we are not alone. Because I think social media, it's very curated. Like, I'll go on Instagram and I'm seeing all my favorite artists and I'm like, wow, you guys look stunning. You guys look like you have your lives together. And I'm over here like, maybe I need to get my life together too.
Right.
And then I always have to remind myself that they are presenting themselves this way. This is not their everyday life. So it's been hard to kind of separate the two. But it's nice that I have friends and family who know what it's like.
Right.
And because they're pursuing the same thing that I am, it's very nice to know that we are going through the same things. We can kind of cope with each other.
Right. So, yes, I agree. So it's essentially, so that community that surrounds you, that love, that support, that foundation is very important, because I mean, all of our problems are sort of unique to us in a way, but we all also sort of experience the same thing. So when people are walking it with you, and also sitting in it with you, sitting in the mess a little bit with you, it feels a little bit more bearable, I guess, like a little bit more manageable. And you learn, and you learn. Natalia, when you hear something like this, like, how important is it to not live a sort of lonely career existence? Because I know for me, I have friends who are in the industry, like we support each other and we go hard for each other as much as we can. And that sort of helps make life a little bit more manageable and makes the stress of the industry and all of its challenges that comes with it a little bit more bearable. What would you say to that, and how would you, like, what sort of advice would you give to a younger person?
I would say just to be aware of the mask, as you mentioned, the mask that we put on when we were on stage, to be aware that it's not your personality. And it doesn't have to be a personality, because I do think that often when we network within the arts and build up an entire community of people that are also within the arts, those people get to know the mask, and we don't feel comfortable actually being ourselves with our peers. So I think it's important to maintain friendships with people that know us as more than just performers. Because that, aside from it being really crucial when the performing's not going well, because with singing, you often will have periods in your life where you cannot sing. So this will include things like pregnancy and illness and random crises that pop up. And so if everybody that you're communicating with sees you only as a performer, then it really makes your mental health suffer worse. I think we can get really lonely, and of course the traveling artists have it worse in this, because oftentimes we feel like, I'm not a success if I stay home. If I never perform in New York, and if I never perform in England, and if I never perform in France, then I'm not a performer. You can't, and people love, of course, to put on their bios all the different places. I do it that I've performed, right? But doing it short term is very different to doing it long term. And so for people who do it long term, the mental load of loneliness for months on end gets harder and harder and harder over time. And so that can create lots and lots of issues with either existing mental issues or creating, depression and problems where, again, you are surrounded by people that see you only as a performer. Some of the things that I don't think that people who are non-performing would know is that if, for instance, so if I got a contract to go sing with an opera house in Europe, I would only be being paid after the performance. So the visa, the flight, the hotel, the accommodation, the food, everything I would have to lay out in advance. And then I would be paid hopefully soon after the performance. But if I get sick,
that's a problem. So all of these, wow.
Right? So all of these factors are not things that people necessarily are going to put on Instagram. And if you, for instance, are living in New York and working in Europe, you would either have to find someone to sublet and pay your rent while you're gone, or you will have, because you are still legally obliged to pay that rent. Right? So the traveling artists, things like the cruise ship life is also something that's really a great training ground for performers, and it's a good steady job, but it's very hard work, and you are at sea. You are expected not just to do the performance. There's other things that you are expected to do. You are working almost constantly, just like any other cruise ship worker, right? So these are not easy careers. But a part of the performance is to make it look easy and pleasurable and enjoyable for everyone. So this also increases the loneliness, because if you are not able to show the huge crowd of people you are surrounded by what you're actually feeling inside, then you end up with a worse issue.
Thank you so much. So, Camille, Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, Natalia. Thank you so much. We do have to wrap this segment. We're going to go to a quick break, but as we go out, we actually have a clip of Camille performing a song. Here's Camille performing There Are Worse Things I Can Do, covering this song. We'll be right back.